Hello, Bill.
Hello, Matt. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and all that good stuff. It is our end of year, seasonal, annual end of year show for the DMZ.
Now, in my household, we do Hanukkah and Christmas, even though, as you know, I'm a non-believer. But want to make sure the kids know that they have ancestry on from two different faiths and don't come from one pool. So we finished up our Hanukkah. Our 3-year-old has successfully lighted the menorah without setting the house on fire. She is getting the lesson that in December you get a present every single day. So I'm sure that is going to help us in the future.
I like it.
We have a little advent calendar that you can put little trinkets in every day. So she's
Bare Naked Ladies has a great album, holiday. It's got Christmas and Hanukkah songs on it.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm quite a holiday music collector.
Oh, okay.
So I have a bunch of Bare Naked.
That wasn't in the bio. I didn't when I was assigned the Bill Scher bio. I missed that part.
There's a fantastic Hanukkah song called "Hanukkah's On" by someone named Matthew Maddock, and you can't find it on the internet anymore. Like his webpage is gone. The blog from a guy who plays the accordion who had uploaded it to his server, that server is down. But it's a real rockin' Hanukkah song, of which there are a few. So the kids are into that now. But they also like the 11 Cats of Christmas by Trout Fishing in America. It's another staple around the house. And we got our Christmas tree decorated last night. We chopped it down ourselves up in the woods of Ashfield.
See, this is where we're opposites because we have our tree mail delivered. I'm not kidding. Every year.
Wow.
I don't know. My wife, is also the family manager, but I swear to you, every year she orders it online, and a tree from like Vermont shows up on our front door in a box, and it's in a box like this big, and when you open the box, the branches come out, and it's a big tree. I mean, I'm talking about like a 7 foot tall, or not big, but. It's a fairly big tree, and it comes in a fairly small, long but thin box. And it's delivered every year. I don't know, it costs like $80 or something.
I did not know people did that. I didn't know that kind of business existed.
This is what cosmopolitan conservatives do. We don't... But you go out and you wrestle a tree down. Apparently, you probably shoot the tree.
When you're in the liberal backwoods, you go up into the hills. Actually, there's a great place in Ashfield called Pure Pan Christmas Tree Farm, and it's run by sort of I think is actually pretty conservative, but they sell the farm as being very eco-friendly because they have a process called stump culture where you're not chopping down the entire tree, you're chopping down essentially the top of the tree or the side of the tree. And the trunk remains rooted and keeps growing.
That's cool. You know what, Bill? I think let's put this in our book proposal. For those of you who don't know, Bill, and I don't think we've talked about it. We're putting together a potential book that we're writing. Who are we fooling, Bill? You're writing the book, but we're doing this, and I think this is an interesting thing where you are the liberal who goes out and cuts down the tree, and I have it delivered from the internet. It's a brave new world that we're dealing with. But it is cool. Little Burke is now, he'll be 2 in January, and so he's sort of aware of what's going on. And also, Burke was asleep, but the wife and I watched a Charlie Brown Christmas the other. It was on a couple of, I think.
I would try to figure out when's the best year to introduce that.
I think as soon as possible. I should have T-voted or something, and it's probably on YouTube. But my son goes to bed at 7, and it came on at 8, so he missed it this year. But what a great show! They don't make them like that anymore.
Oh no, it's absolutely a classic. The thing that I've been holding back on the Charlie Brown in general. Like, my kid watches more YouTube than a 3-year-old should. I'll cop that already. I use it as a crutch. I work in the house. Sometimes I just gotta have some time to do stuff. And giving her the iPhone with the YouTube is a way to do that. Well, I try to.
Let's see. We got Burke an iPad Mini for Christmas.
Yeah.
That's his Christmas present, and We haven't given it to him yet, obviously, but
right.
he loves video and pictures.
Mine is familiar with the iPad as well. We've crossed that threshold also.
I don't even have an iPad. I don't even have one.
But I try to sit there and watch them with there, and so when there's actually a book called Nurture Shock, which is sort of the latest and greatest in parenting and children in behavioral science, and they talk about how they say, yeah, sure, violence in media has a negative impact on kids, but it's actually kind of marginal, and the effects fade. What's actually more insidious is children acting mean or people acting mean in these shows. And it does not matter if there's a lesson learned at the end of the show, because a young child is not following the story arc. They're just seeing the act of meanness, and that's what's sticking. And so I try very hard to show her things that don't have those. And most shows have some sort of conflict or some sort of tension that gets resolved. So it's usually somebody acting mean. And so I try to show her things that don't have that. But the problem with YouTube is that she figures out how to use the phone. She jumps from show to show, and before you know it, or
I think you're smart to be cognizant of what they're watching. I'm going to be like, I think it was Hayek believed that society and a country should be a free market, but that families can't operate. Families should be essentially socialistic or even dictatorship. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to censor, and I'm going to be very careful what the kids watch. But you talked about a book. There's another book called Everything Bad is Good for You by Stephen Johnson that argues that video, not necessarily violent, but video games and all of these, TV, modern TV, is actually making us smarter, as opposed to like watching the mind-numbed shows that that had sort of boring plot lines. So there's another,
there's of course a question of age appropriateness for all these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so when I see something, when I see conflict, I call attention to it, and I say, so this character is not being nice to this character, and try to engage her on the subject. So at least I don't know if it actually works or not, but I feel like I'm mitigating some of the.
Well, look at those damn reindeer were really bastards to Rudolph. I mean, let's be honest.
Well, that's the thing. There's all this stuff that seems very innocuous. That seems all nostalgic and heartfelt because what you grew up with. But again, depending on the age of the child, you actually might be sending a bad message without realizing it. And that's why I've held off on the Charlie Brown, because they basically treat Charlie Brown like crap the entire show. Even if Charlie Brown wins the day at the end, there's 20 minutes of crap before the very end.
By the way,
and the lesson doesn't necessarily stick.
Let me highly recommend that Saturday Night Live just did this skit where it's it's a weird skit because it's SNL cast playing celebrities who are playing the Charlie Brown Christmas show. And so I don't know who the actor is, but he's playing Al Pacino playing Charlie Brown. But Martin Short was hosting, and he plays Larry David playing, I think, Linus. And the Larry David...
That would make sense.
Martin Short's Larry David impersonation is so...
Linus is Jewish, so...
It's amazing. The body language especially. It's so good. So check that out on YouTube, everybody. And if you can't find it, get your kid's iPad. They'll show you how to find it, I'm sure.
Now speaking of corporate plugs, you have something to plug.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Bill. I would have probably forgotten. I'm happy to announce that my podcast, The Matt Lewis Show, has partnered with The Copia, and it's at thecopia, COPIA.com. This is a really, really cool service. It's essentially an ebook reader and a social network all tied into one. So, for example, let's say that you and I, we're pals and we want to read the same books. You could read Everything Bad is Good for You by Stephen Johnson and take notes in the margins of your e-reader, and I would be able to see what notes you're making, and you could see mine. So we can sort of, the social network, we're sharing information, we're sharing what we read, and what we think about what we read, the notes in the margins. and an e-reader, all wrapped up into one. And so I started this little book club, and the first book we're reading is Ross Douthat's Bad Religion. He's going to come back on the podcast and take your questions. And we just gave away 10, I don't know if we're going to do it anymore, but if you go to mattklewis.com, you can find out more about the Copia and our whole deal. And we just gave away 10 copies of that book, but we're going to do more books. I would even open, like, what books should we read? I'm not Oprah. This is going to be a much smaller thing, but I think it's a really cool thing. So go to thecopia.com, sign up, go to mattklewis.com, find out more. And hopefully we can read, look, you guys, if you're obviously watching or listening to this right now, no reason we couldn't also network together, read some books together, and have some fun. So check it out.
Very interesting. I'm intrigued. And also, while we're plugging, Liberal Oasis Radio Show, the podcast is on YouTube now at youtube.com/Liberal Oasis TV.
And it's really good, by the way, Bill. It is amazing, the quality. Because a lot of times when people try to do video, it's crappy. It's like them, on a computer or something. But this is like a professional thing you got going here.
No, I'm essentially renting out the space from David Pakman. It is a David Pakman show, and he has provided his staff to actually do the technical stuff and edit the clips and everything. So I'm blessed in that respect. So yeah, it's pretty decent quality. And I don't have a sponsor, but there's YouTube ads. So if any chance of me actually making money over doing this podcast, this is it. So if you go to youtube.com/LiberalOasisTV, you subscribe.
Well, help me make this thing with the Copia.
Yes.
Make that a success. Maybe we can get them to sponsor Liberal Oasis as well. They're not
I like your thinking.
So let's scratch my back and I'll scratch your back. See what we can do.
I will go ahead and buy 100 copies of Bad Religion right now.
All right. Well, let's. This is our special. If you haven't guessed, this is our special year-end holiday show. So we're going to avoid talking about some of the bad, horrible, serious things happening, and the news is full of it, and talk about the year in DMZ. So
what we got right this year, what we got wrong.
Yeah.
Let's try to have some pundit accountability here for once. Punditry is usually a profession where there is zero accountability. You can be wrong all day long, and if you speak nicely in front of the camera, nobody cares.
Right, and they're never held accountable. And this is actually a true. I'm sure other people at Blogging His World do this, but I started doing this a couple years ago. I think it was Tim Carney. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was Tim Carney who started. He challenged everybody to write a year-end column, what I got wrong. So this is like my third year of having the airing of grievances, the airing of mistakes, putting it all out there, what I got wrong, and so this time I don't have to write it. Maybe I can just say it.
So do you want to start with what you got wrong or what you got right?
Well, let's start with what we got wrong, Bill, and let's just go. Okay. We'll take turns. Why don't you kick it off? What's
sure?
And for me, I'll say there were big things and little things. So let's start with the big things we got wrong and work our way down to the trivial.
Well, I forgive me if I wasn't exhaustive in my own self-critical research as I should have been, but the two big things I got wrong had the same theme, which was a misreading of the conservative movement, which I'm sort of mad about. I feel like I'm pretty good at not just buying into the most one-dimensional conservative stereotype. I'm usually going to other liberals and saying, wait a second, things are more nuanced than you're making it out to be, and obviously talking to you is a big help with that. But nevertheless, I still thought that Romney would not be the nominee because I generally would say, look, anyone can get this nomination. It's up for grabs. You only need to get 33% of the primary vote to win Iowa, New Hampshire, and catapult you. And lots of folks could put together that kind of faction. But I always thought that Romney was the one guy who would not get it because Romney Care was just a non-negotiable with the base. And he somehow managed to diffuse that, I think probably because of the weakness of the opposition. But even still, it still surprised me because it's not like it was an unknown and it was such a hot subject. You would think you wouldn't need to have to sell that point to knock Romney out of the box. And in the same vein, at the end of the campaign, I actually had written a post the top 11 excuses conservatives are already making for losing, because I was in the presumption that once Obama won, there'd be this big movement to delegitimize it and say it was semi-fraudulent or otherwise a fluke and not really about issue positions. But a lot of things that, and it's true that a lot of conservatives were making pre-excuses in September and October. But after the actual election, you actually heard a lot less of that and more acceptance, or I mean, maybe it's not it's too sanguine, but resignment that there was a demographical shift in the country, that Obama was too hard to beat, and Republicans can't just simply sell the same message they have in the past. They're ever going to win again. And you're even hearing folks on the right say Obama did win a mandate to raise taxes on the rich, and we have to accept that fact, which is that kind of acceptance that I've not seen conservatives do in my adult lifetime. So I was very surprised by that.
So you're saying you were wrong about two things. You didn't think Romney could win the primary, and you didn't think Republicans would. You didn't think that once Obama was reelected that Republicans would be as introspective as they have been.
Well, I didn't think they would acknowledge that Obama had any sort of mandate at all. I thought there would be a soul searching upon a loss, and I thought there would be rifts and infighting and that stuff. I did think that. But I thought there would be a much bigger concerted effort to say, there's no mandate here. Romney was a terrible candidate, and the Fed goosed the economy, and all that kind of stuff to say it's not about Obama's policy positions and ideological vision. And now you're hearing people say, hey, well, Obama gave all these gifts, which has sort of this twinge of sour grapes, but is sort of a de facto acknowledgement. People like the policies that he passed, and we were not able to convince people they were bad policies. And so that kind of argumentation I was very surprised by. So
when I went through and tried to call through my blog at the Daily Caller and find what I'd done wrong. And there are things, but I do want to preface it. I was surprised. Mostly, I think I got it right. Mostly. There are certainly some things I got wrong, and I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But the thing that surprises me every time I do this, it's not what I got wrong, it's the emphasis. So, I think the Bible says something that, we're judged not just for the bad things we say or do, but for every idle word. And if you look through a blog, there are a lot of idle words. There are a lot of blog posts that are about things that didn't become big deals, that were, that the media was obsessing on a single day, but didn't really become part of the story or part of the narrative. Probably didn't even deserve to be commented on in hindsight. So when I go through my blog, I'm not so much astonished by things I got wrong, but I'm astonished by things that at the time seemed like they might be important, and they ended up not being important at all. Having said that, there certainly were some things that I did get wrong, and the big one that I'll start with is that I thought the election was going to be pretty close. I mean, I did not predict that, I kind of thought Obama would win. I certainly didn't predict Romney would win. But I was skeptical of the polls, as you know, Bill. I was skeptical of what I found to be an absurd notion that Obama could have the same enthusiasm and turnout that he had 4 years ago in light of all the things that had happened. He's now on the record of taking votes. And we clashed on that here, and clearly I was wrong. I mean, I don't know if the enthusiasm was as high as 08, but it was much higher than I thought.
It was not a tick.
The election was not as close as I thought the election would be very close, and I probably gave Obama, a slight advantage, but I thought it would be close. It really wasn't that close, Bill.
I mean, we've actually ended on a 4-point margin, which is actually a little bit wider than the day of reporting. Folks haven't been checking the David Wasserman Cook Political Report Google spreadsheet. He's been tracking all the late numbers, and the margin has sort of gradually widened over time. And now there's, I think, just a handful of votes left out in New York City that haven't been counted yet.
Well, I'm talking electorally, Bill. I thought it would come down to like Ohio or or
Right.
something, that, Obama would win because by like one state, that we would find out.
And Obama won essentially. Obama won all the swing except
it wasn't
North
close.
Carolina.
It wasn't. It really, probably wasn't as close as the popular vote would even now, even at this point, lead you to believe. So,
actually, one of the interesting things about that is, turnout, because there was some notion on the right that, turnout was lower and Romney got less votes than McCain, and this shows that was a base turnout problem. And that's based on the reporting from the day of. Actually, at this point, Romney now, has more votes than McCain did. He broke 60 million. And there was a 2% drop in overall turnout, but that's all from the non-swing states. Turnout was actually ever so slightly higher in the swing states than the non-swing states, which shows the effectiveness of the micro-targets from going on.
Have you read this book, Bill? There's a book out called The Victory Lab. That
I have it on my shelf, and I'm actually in the middle of a stretch of presidential history books. I haven't gotten onto the Victory Lab yet, but I do want to get to it.
That's a book that everyone says predicted and sort of tells the story of how Obama won technologically.
Right. So I think that's the kind of thing where I might have thought conservatives would have hung their hat on more. I mean, there's obviously some of it, and said this is all about newfangled, psycho marketing, and this doesn't mean that people want higher taxes on the wealthy, but you haven't seen. They say some of that stuff, but it's really not as concerted an effort to deny the argument that Obama has a mandate on certain issues.
Well, what I like is, the Washington Post came out with a thing about a week ago saying, well, the Hispanic vote isn't what cost Romney, or that had nothing to do with it. And there's, technically speaking, they're right. I mean, but Romney lost like 71% of Hispanics. And to me, why provide Republicans excuses to continue ignoring what is obviously a looming threat to their ability to ever win again? To me,
it's a big existential question. What has to change, the messaging or the policies?
Well, I think
is there a way to?
And I think, going back to the Victory Lap, I think it would be a mistake for Republicans to blame technological deficiency as the cause or the root problem, but they clearly have to address it. They have to do a better job of micro targeting and all and turnout and all of the stuff that they failed at.
Right. So that's the stuff that we got wrong. What do you think you got right?
Well, I'm not done with the stuff I got wrong, Bill. Shall I keep going, or do you have more that you got wrong?
I've heard my wrongness. if someone remembers something that I did it, I'm happy to cop to it. That's what I remember.
Well, I'll go quick through the other stuff I got wrong.
Okay.
The convention. I dramatically underestimated the disparity between the two conventions. I thought that both conventions were good. I thought that the Democratic convention, certainly during the daytime hours, gave prominent.
You were horrified, if I recall. You were personally horrified.
Yes, that there were a lot of leftists who were vastly out of touch with Middle America, who were given a lot of stage time. But to the Democrats' credit, they wisely did that during non-primetime hours. And I thought the Republican convention.
And there wasn't a lot of Republican making hay of that. I didn't see a lot of YouTubing from the right. Oh my God! Here's what they said at 3:00 in the afternoon.
Right, and the mainstream media, of course, didn't pick it up. And I think had the situation been reversed, if Pat Robertson had given a big speech or something, that would have certainly been used. But I also and I thought the Republicans didn't have a perfect convention, but I felt at the end of the convention that they did an okay job, and that Mitt Romney had finally been humanized, which I thought was sort of the goal that they needed to do. They needed to humanize Romney. But I think I was wrong. In retrospect, it appears that the conventions were a big boost to the Democrats. They got the last convention. They had the last word, so sort of expected. But I think Bill Clinton's speech really made a difference. And I think clearly I was wrong. I underestimated how much better the Democratic convention was than the Republican convention.
Although I do recall you did not buy the conventional wisdom at the time that Ann Romney's speech was so great, that Ann did a good job at humanizing Mitt. You thought she had kind of a weird speech.
Yeah, and I also thought it was weird that Condi Rice spoke. It seemed apropos of nothing and kind of a non sequitur. It was a good speech, but why was she speaking? And I thought that the Clint Eastwood speech was bizarre. And I thought that they made mistakes. Like there was a terrific bio film of Mitt Romney that they didn't air during prime time.
I've heard that critique, but if they aired that in that 10 p.m. slot, the networks wouldn't have shown it. They would have cut away the commentary.
I don't know. I thought that some of the stuff that they did, like that film, and also some of the testimonials about Romney the man, were much more powerful than Clint Eastwood, and they were certainly overshadowed.
I mean, if you had a Chris Christie speech in primetime that was about Romney the man, then maybe that would have made it more of a humanizing convention.
Right. So you're right, Bill. I mean, in fairness to me, I was critical of the Republican convention, but still, I thought that at the end of the day, it basically did what it needed to do. And I thought that the Democratic convention basically did what it needed to do, too. But I didn't think that the Democratic convention was head and shoulders better. But looking in retrospect, I think it clearly was that the Democrats got a lot more mileage out of their convention. And so I think I was wrong about that.
Have we exhausted your wrong list?
No, I've been wrong about other stuff this year, Bill.
I feel bad that I'm not flagellating myself.
That's okay.
Much.
I think that, in prep, I forgot that I was supposed to come up with what I was right about. I was focused on the negatives. But let me just go on. The 47%. I think it hurt him much more than I thought it would. That comment, the video of Romney saying the 47%. I thought that everybody would assume the other guy was the 47%. I'm not a leech on it's the other guy. Even though I may get all sorts of government benefits, it's those other people. They're the problem. They're the 47%. I think clearly it did hurt Romney more than I thought, and I think part of that is because Obama did a really good job of using it against him. But I think it was wrong there. Susan Rice.
But I think you had the grain of what is normally a correct idea. I think typically speaking, you're right. That people look at the other guy, not themselves. Like just the way Romney said it, the broadness way Romney said it, made it harder. Made people feel like, wow, he's really painting a broad brush on all of us. But I think typically, I think your instinct was not altogether out of whack. Just the specific of the case of Romney's phrasing was what.
Yeah, and it played into pre-existing stereotypes about Romney, which I'll talk about later. A couple other quick things I got wrong, Bill. Susan Rice. I thought that Obama would certainly nominate her because I thought that it would give Republicans would take the bait. You'd have these old white men attacking a young black woman. I thought Obama would love to see that play out. Didn't happen. I was wrong about that. I thought that Ed Gillespie joining the Republican Party and the fact that they had hired some new media folks that had good relations with conservatives would help Romney and would sort of help win over the conservative movement. I don't think that really moved the needle. Jennifer Granholm's speech at the Democratic Convention, I loved it. I think most people think it was bizarre. I found it oddly.
I love that speech.
I thought it was a great speech, and it moved me. But
her career has not been harmed after that.
I thought that when I saw Twitter explode and I saw all the conservatives mocking the speech, I thought that they were all drinking the Republican Kool-Aid, that they were mocking it because they didn't get it, and that I did. But in retrospect, I think it really was more of an inkblot test, a Rorschach test. I don't think that it's universally thought of. I thought it was a dynamic speech, but I think that is certainly in the eye of the beholder. And then lastly, Bill, I didn't predict the Detroit Tigers would win the World Series, but I was rooting for them, and they lost. I think they went down 4 straight games. So those are the I think the big mistakes that I made in 2012. I mean, the big public mistakes. There's a lot of private stuff we won't go into.
But you must have gotten something right. It was not entirely wrong for you.
Well, let's talk about some of the stuff we got right, Bill, and let's start with you, because I think you obviously got some of the big stuff right that I got wrong this year.
Well, I want to. There are two things I want to point out that were sort of long view things. One, I want to give myself credit for what I said in December of 2010, when I touted the tax cut deal that Obama brokered with Republicans, which most professional liberals, professional left, disparaged. And I was one of the few at the time that said, look, you're getting some stimulus out of this deal. You're getting $300 billion of stimulus, and that's nothing to sneeze at, and there's no other way you were going to get it besides doing a deal like this. And the economic forecasters at the moment were projecting that it was going to lead to anywhere from 0.6% additional GDP growth to 1 point. And look, what we've seen in the last 2 years is about 2% growth annually. And you and I, Matt, for a long time we've been talking about how good does the economy have to be for Obama to put the wind at Obama's back or to sink him, and there was never a precise number you could put on it.
I think I was wrong about that too, but I think I was wrong about that. I think I was wrong about that last year. I don't know that I said. Well,
you thought where they
this
were.
Is a good point though, Bill. Because I think that we all. I mean, you didn't. You were right about this, but I think I and most people, conventional wisdom was that if the unemployment rate was hovering around the 8%, range, Obama couldn't be reelected. And clearly that. Well,
I think you also agree that the issue was trajectory.
I did, and I changed. And by the way, I had, several months before the election, I realized that the premise was wrong, and so I adjusted and adapted it. But there was a time. Certainly, the trajectory is important, Bill. But I still thought, if it's 8% or around 8%. It just can't be done. I mean, history would imply that he couldn't be reelected.
Right. And I think it went down it peaked at around 10 and got down to just below 8, and you had about 2% GDP growth. And, none of that is fantastic, but obviously was good enough. But I think it's fair to say if that GDP growth was 1 point lower, if you're at 1% growth and not 2%, and you were essentially a flat economy, then our employment rate probably would not have gone below 8%. Maybe you'd be closer to 9%. You might have a totally different race. And I think you could make the case that if Obama had not done that deal which he's got almost no credit for, which no one brags about today, that may give just enough extra stimulus to get over the hump in 2012. So I want to give myself some personal credit for backing that at the time. And in a similar vein, my Times op-ed about how liberals win, which praised his wheeling and dealing with corporations to get stuff done, even that meant for imperfect legislation. I think it was absolutely essential for Obama to go into the race with accomplishments. So we could say, I did this. As much as people said the Recovery Act was controversial and Obamacare was controversial, it was key to his message that I did things. I didn't twiddle my thumbs here. There's stuff that we did that's put us on a better path. And if he hadn't made those compromises, it's what some folks on the left were saying, that you should just stick to your guns, draw your red lines, and if they don't come to your position, then fight it out on election day. And there's a time and a place for that. I'm not saying you should always compromise. But if that's all he did and he had no accomplishments, I don't see what the messaging is in 2012. I fought really hard for 4 years, and the economy still, and I have nothing to show for it. So I think those are two key elements of why he was able to be in a position to win. Now, two other things I would say that maybe you might still disagree with. Maybe these aren't clear-cut things that I got right, but things we argued about the past 6 months. I would say at the end of the day, this was a substantive campaign. This was not a gloom and doom, solely negative campaign. I'm not saying there weren't sharp elbows, there obviously were, but I thought you had three very substantive debates. I thought the public was given very clear ideological choices, and I think there is a degree of an Obama mandate now because of it. It's not a mandate to do whatever he wants whenever he wants to, but it's enough of a mandate that he can say, hey, we litigated the tax issue in the campaign, and now he's on the verge of winning that argument legislatively. And the other thing in the campaign that I was getting a lot of flack on the comment threads was, did the first debate matter? Did that actually fundamentally alter the race or not? You could pick your polls to argue, I think, one way or the other. I would go with what the Obama pollster said after the race, which was they showed a drop in support from previously Romney-leaning independents, but they never lost their core support. They never went below majority support, never lost their lead because of that debate. And that was always my argument, that sure, in past debates involving incumbents, they usually lose the first debate. It sometimes involves a tightening of the race, but never causes the lead change. I think in the end I was one out there. Obviously, if you follow the Gallup tracking poll, that would not jive. But Gallup tracking seems to have been off the mark, so I wouldn't go with that.
I'll just briefly comment on a couple of those things. So I think that the debate thing. I'm not going to argue with you. We've had it out on this. I would just say this: if Mitt Romney hadn't had a great debate, the first debate, then this
would have been over.
It would have been over. It would have been.
He would have cratered. I agree that he remained competitive because of the first debate. I will totally concede that.
And I think that it set. And I think that because he had a first debate, I would still argue. I mean, it's hard to prove something that didn't happen that might have happened. I think it gave him an opportunity that he ended up not fully exploiting. And some of that maybe is Sandy, and some of it maybe is his own failings. But I think that first debate performance, had he not performed so well, it would have been over. And I also think that it did give him an opportunity to a chance to win, and he obviously did. It's kind of impossible to prove or disprove that. Let's see. You also talked about substance, Bill. I think that there was, first of all, I think it was an incredibly negative campaign. There's no doubt about that. I think that Obama's strategy all along was to attack Romney and rather than defending Obama's own record, to essentially make it a referendum on Romney and to cast him as an evil rich guy. And I think that's very negative, and it worked. He effectively did it. I think, though, that you do have a point that some of the negativity wasn't frivolous. Some of the negativity was substantive, and that it did lead to some really larger conversations, including the 47%. And what's the proper role of government? And I don't think that these things are settled forever. But I do think that clearly they were settled for 2012, and that there were some big issues that did get debated in the process of the messiness of the campaign. So I will give you, if I am the Washington Post fact checker, I will give you a partially, maybe mostly right on some of those. But interesting.
I get a one Pinocchio?
Well, I prefer to see the glass.
That grading system is so
cool.
wrong. Like if you're half right, you get a Pinocchio anyway. You know, there's
yeah, what's up with that?
It's a horrible curve.
So where was I right, Bill? I think there was one, and this sort of it's kind of a great segue. I was right about a lot of stuff. As I went through, I was really looking for where I was wrong. And again, as I went through, I was, I think I was mostly right about most stuff this year. But the one thing where I think I was, and by the way, after hearing all the things I was wrong about, you may you may find it to be ridiculous. After I went through the litany of mistakes I made, I'm not George W. Bush. I'm willing to admit where I was wrong. But after going through the litany, you may be surprised to learn that I still believe that I was mostly right about most things. But the big thing that I think I was right about was Mitt Romney. Not that he would win, because I didn't say he would win, and I didn't think he would win, but I thought it would be very close, and he could win. He might win. But no, I was right that he would be a bad candidate. I was right that Mitt Romney is a caricature of an out-of-touch, rich white guy, and that nominating him would cast the Republican Party defending essentially the indefensible, and that it would be walking right into Barack Obama's trap, which is he wants it to be about class warfare. He wants it to be about the 1%. He wants it to be about the haves versus the have-nots. And the Republicans already have this stereotype of being for the rich and all that. We know. I don't have to go through it. You know. And then Mitt Romney is the perfect villain. He is perfectly cast for the role as villain. And I think that almost sums up the election right there. It was probably over before it started. And, Romney, you got this bad economy. And Obama can't defend the economy, but what he can do is say, but what about these evil bad guys over here? And Romney was perfect for that. The vulture capitalism stuff, the tax, it won't reveal the taxes, offshore account, all the things, true or not. The guy, and it's not about being rich, it's that he seems rich. He doesn't seem like you or me. I mean, Huckabee said something, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it was something like, he doesn't remind you of your father, he reminds you of the guy who fired your father. Well, right. I mean, I've talked about it before, Bill. I'm from a blue-collar and a working-class rural family. My dad was a correctional officer. Romney just rubs me a little bit the wrong way. I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure he's a really great father. But stylistically, something a little bit elite, and where I come from, which frankly, I went to college in West Virginia. It's not that different. Maryland, where I'm from, borders Pennsylvania. My mom lives in Pennsylvania now.
You're from Western Maryland.
Western Maryland, very rural Western Maryland. Borders. My mom lives in Pennsylvania now. I was born about 30 miles probably from the Pennsylvania border, same distance from the West Virginia border. I went to college in West Virginia. Sort of got an Ohio feel. I knew that he just wouldn't resonate. And I think if you look, I don't know if it's been proven or not, but there's an argument that Romney lost because he lost a lot of white votes, like working class white voter, people in West Virginia, people in Ohio who just couldn't bring themselves to vote for either guy. And I think that I was right about that. And I think that some of my conservative friends who were, they were in college Republicans and they're from more different areas of the country, different backgrounds than me. I don't think that they appreciated how off tone Mitt Romney is to the populist conservative world, the Reagan Democrat world. And I think I recognize that because of where I'm from. And I don't think I think some conservatives miss that, Bill.
Now, I know that the Republican pollster David Winston has said we can't just blame Romney for that. We can't just presume that we lost because of high minority turnout in urban areas, because we also lost the Senate race in North Dakota and we lost the Senate race in Montana. And these are pretty white states where Romney was not the major, and these were Romney states that Romney won. Yeah. So is there something else going on with the Republican Party message that's not populist enough, that's hurting them beyond the presidential campaign?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, and I think Mitt Romney, again, is probably a good man. He's probably a good family guy, and I think he ran a pretty good race, all things considered. And I kind of resented. Look, I've been critical of Romney the whole time, and I've said good things about him too. But I mean, I've been skeptical. I never drank the Romney Kool-Aid, so I was skeptical and critical of him the whole time. But I was a little bit put off by how the day after he loses, some people who had been calling me a rhino, calling me a liberal for criticizing Romney, the day after Romney loses, they kick him when he's down. And I think the guy ran a good campaign. I just think that the problem with Mitt Romney was Mitt Romney. It was him as a person. And look, I know North Dakota pretty well. There's some uniquenesses to that race. Heidi Heitkamp, who won that race, is part of a very prominent North Dakota family. She almost became governor about a decade ago. I think she had breast cancer, and that kind of derailed her campaign. And Hoeven ended up winning that seat and came on at the end very strong after she had this illness. So I give that one an asterisk. It's a weird state. Remember, North Dakota had for years voted for Republican presidents, and they always elected Democrats. All three, up until very recently, 2 Democratic senators and a Democratic congressman, even though the State House, the Attorney General, the Insurance Commissioner, and the President always goes Republican because they like pork in North Dakota. They like sending Democrats to Washington who will bring back the pork. So that's sort of an asterisk. But I think I get Winston's larger point. The problem isn't just Mitt Romney. There are structural big problems with the Republican Party that it's not just Romney. But I also will say, look, whoever's at the top of the ticket impacts the whole political environment, whether or not, even if you're in a state where that seems to be irrelevant or seems to be moot, it's still, the mainstream media is talking about it. So it's going to splash over and impact down ballot races regardless.
So anything else you want to get into of things you got right?
No, I think that the big political thing I got right this year was my skepticism of Romney, and the fact that I, patting myself on the back here, after he became the nominee, and I wrote good things about him too, you know that, but I continued to be skeptical of him and write and be honest with my readers about why I thought he had problems. And when he did well, when he had that great debate, I wrote that he had a great debate, and then I really thought it would change things. But I continued to be skeptical of him, and I continued to think he was a flawed candidate. And I think that there's little doubt now that that's right. And again, the irony is that for saying that, some people, criticized. Some people thought that I was a liberal because I dared to say that the guy who, the rich guy who passed socialized health care in his state might be a flawed candidate. I mean,
Well, do you want to wrap it up there, or do you want to get into the year's unsung heroes or those we say good riddance to?
Well, you know what I think we could do, Bill? We've droned on here for a while. We could come back to that. I don't think there's anything stopping us from talking in the new year, because I think we're taking Christmas week off, and who knows when this is going to air. I think the suits at Blogheads are going to air this sometime during the holiday season. But I don't think anything's stopping us in the new year from revisiting what was 2012 and talking about some of the unsung heroes and some other things. So we could do that.
Well, and if the fiscal cliff debate is resolved by the new year and gun control legislation is still being treated upon, we might have to fill some time in the early weeks of the month. But that, as we tape this, I can't tell you where either of those issues are going to go from here. So we'll see.
We don't know what's going to happen, and as we tape,
I have my prediction.
I don't want to.
I am on the record. I'm on the record, by the way. I'll say this, even though it's going to tape later, just so I can embarrass myself later. I'm on the record saying Obama and Boehner will announce a deal Friday, December 21st. They'll vote on it after Christmas. It will lose the first vote in the House. The market will tank, and they'll pass on the second vote. That is my fiscal cliff prediction.
Well, the good news for you, Bill, is if you're wrong, that won't count against your 2013 score. And I am scoring this vote, by the way, but it's not going to count against your 2013 record. So I think you're in the clear here.
All right, sir. Well, have a great Christmas. Are you home for Christmas or are you traveling?
We don't play road games. People come to us, Bill. We've got 2 little kids to use as cover to force people to travel to our house. How about you, Bill?
Well, we're in the same boat. I feel like people are pressuring us more. They're not respecting our trump cards. But we've held the fort, and folks are coming here.
Have they no decency
for the day?
You've got children.
We're gonna have to do some traveling outside of those dates. We're gonna have to do one trip to see a sibling before Christmas. We have to do a trip after Christmas. But Christmas Day we'll be home, and I need to procure myself some good beef roast. I have yet to do that. That's why I'm trying to establish that as Christmas tradition that it's beef.
Good to have these traditions, and good to stake out, home games, home field advantage. Man, you control the TV, you control the heating, the everything. It's very important to. And by the way, I only look good in certain light, so I have to have that as well. I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into hosting a family event. So.
We will talk in the new year.
Yeah, man. Great year. I think we had a very good, solid year. Thank you to the audience and the viewers and the listeners of the DMZ for putting up with us this year. And Bill, it's always a pleasure. I don't know how many years we've been doing this, but I think we may have had our best year in 2012.
I agree, and I hope that even though I know this was not the best political year for conservatives, I hope I made it a little bit more tolerable for you. I hope I wasn't overly smug.
I think we managed to get through a pretty divisive and negative year without too much disharmony here. So, and that is the spirit of the season. So, I say to you, Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas.
And the same to you.
And I will see you and you, the good people here, in the new year. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.